Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars through the main window. His ship had been traveling for 3 months, looking for new worlds where humans could live. The crew was tired but hopeful. They had found 2 planets that might work for colonies. "Captain," said Lieutenant Sam Davis from his communication station, "I'm getting strange readings on the long-range sensors." Jake walked over to look at the screen. "What kind of strange?" "Big ships. Sir, really big. They're coming our way fast." Commander Lisa Parker looked up from her security console. Her face was serious. "Captain, those ships are massive. Each one is 10 times bigger than ours." Jake felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his voice calm. "How many ships?" 12 that I can see," Lisa said. "Maybe more behind them." Dr. Alex Turner, the ship's scientist, came running onto the bridge. "Captain, are we really seeing alien ships? This is amazing. This is what we've hoped for." "Calm down, Alex," Jake said. "We don't know if they're friendly yet." The main screen lit up with an image that made everyone gasp. The alien ships looked like floating cities made of dark metal. They had sharp edges and glowing red lights. Each ship was so big it could hold 1 million people. "They're trying to talk to us," Sam said, his hands shaking as he worked the controls. "The signal is very strong." "Put it through," Jake ordered. Deep voice filled the bridge. The words were strange at first, but the computer quickly translated them. "Small vessel, you will stop moving. You will surrender. You will obey." Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment that would decide everything. "Open a channel, Sam." "Channel open, sir." "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship New. Horizon, we come in peace. We would like to talk." There was silence for a moment. Then the voice came back, sounding surprised. "Humans, we do not know this word. You will surrender now, or we will destroy you." "We understand you are powerful," Jake said carefully, "but we would like to meet and talk. Perhaps we can learn from each other." Lisa whispered, "Captain, what are you doing?" "They could blow us up in seconds." Jake held up his hand for quiet. He waited for the aliens to respond. The voice came back, but this time it sounded curious. "You wish to meet, even though you are weak and small?" "Yes," Jake said. "We believe talking is better than fighting." Another long pause. Then the voice said, "I am War Commander Thekanol of the Kethfer Empire. You interest me, small human. We will meet. But if you try to trick us, we will kill you and destroy your world." "We understand," Jake said. "We have no tricks. We only want to talk. You will come to our main ship. Bring 5 of your people. No weapons." The channel closed. The bridge was quiet for a moment. "Captain," Lisa said, "this could be a trap." "We don't know anything about these aliens." "I know," Jake said. "But if we don't try to talk, they might attack anyway. At least this way, we have a chance." Dr. Turner was excited. "This is the greatest day in human history. First contact with an alien race. Maybe," Jake said, "or it could be our last day. Lisa, you'll come with me. Alex, you too. Sam, and ... He looked around the bridge. Chief Engineer Ben Collins. That's 5. An hour later, the 5 humans sat in a small shuttle, flying toward the huge alien ship. The Kethfer vessel was so big it looked like a metal moon. Lights blinked along its surface, and strange symbols glowed in the dark. "Look at the size of that thing," Ben said, his eyes wide. "How do they even build something that big?" "Very carefully, I hope," Sam said nervously. The shuttle flew into a huge opening in the alien ship. Inside, the walls were covered with the same glowing symbols. The air felt heavy and smelled like metal. 2 aliens were waiting for them. Jake had to look up to see their faces. The Kethfer stood 9 feet tall. Their skin looked like gray stone, and their arms were as thick as tree. Trunks, they wore dark armor that seemed to be part of their bodies. "I am War Commander Thekanol," said the bigger alien. His voice was deep like thunder. "You are even smaller than I thought." "I am Captain Jake Morrison," Jake said, trying not to show his fear. "Thank you for meeting with us." Thekanol made a sound that might have been laughter. "Follow me, Tiny." Humans. They walked through corridors that were built for giants. Everything was huge. The doors, the walls, even the lights. Other Kethfer stopped to stare at the humans. Some pointed and made sounds like they were talking about interesting pets. Finally, they reached a big room with a table made of black stone. Thekanol sat down, and the humans took seats across from him. Even sitting, the alien was taller than they were. "So," Thekanol said, "you want to talk." "Talk about what?" "About peace," Jake said. "About how our peoples can live together without fighting." "Peace?" Thekanol looked confused. "There is no peace in the galaxy. There is only strength and weakness. The strong rule. The weak serve or die." Dr. Turner leaned forward. "But surely, there are other ways to solve problems? Ways that don't involve fighting? Like what?" Thekanol asked. "Like sharing knowledge," Alex said. "Like working together to build better things." Thekanol stood up suddenly. The humans jumped in their chairs. The war commander walked to a metal beam that was part of the wall. It was as thick as a man's body. Without any effort, Thekanol grabbed the beam with his bare hands and crushed it like paper. "This is strength," he said, dropping the twisted metal. "This is why we rule the galaxy. We have conquered 847 different races across 12,000 star systems. Do you know why?" The humans stared at the crushed beam. "Any one of them would need big machines to bend metal like that, because you're very strong," Jake said quietly. "Exactly," Thekanol said, sitting back down. "And you are very weak. But you amuse me. Most races cry and beg when they see our power. You ask questions." Dr. Turner was still staring at the metal beam. "Excuse me, War Commander. Could I look at that metal? I'd like to see how it was made." Thekanol looked surprised. "You want to study the metal? Not run away in fear?" "Well, yes," Alex said. "The molecular structure must be fascinating. And your hand strength. How much pressure can you apply? What's the maximum force your muscles can generate?" Now Thekanol looked really confused. He turned to Jake. "Your scientist is not afraid?" "Humans are curious," Jake said. "When we see something new, we want to understand it. Even when that something could kill you?" "Especially then," Ben said with a small smile. "That's how we learn." Thekanol was quiet for a long moment. Then he made that sound like laughter again. "You are strange, humans, very strange. I have met many races, but none like you." "What happens to the races you meet?" Lisa asked. "The strong ones fight us and lose. The weak ones surrender immediately. Both end up serving the Empire." "And if we don't want to fight or surrender?" Jake asked. Thekanol's eyes glowed brighter. "Then you die." The room became very quiet. The humans looked at each other. This was the moment Jake had been dreading. What if there was a third choice? He said finally, "There is no third choice. What if we could show you something new? Something that might change how you think about strength?" Thekanol leaned forward. For the first time, he looked truly interested. "What could you possibly show? The greatest warriors in the galaxy?" Jake smiled. "Give us time, and we'll show you." 3 days later, the New Horizon followed the Kethfer fleet toward their home world. Jake stood on the bridge, watching as more and more alien ships joined them. Some were Kethfer vessels, but others looked different. "Captain," Sam said, "I'm counting over 50 ships now, and they're all huge." Commander Lisa Parker was studying the readings. Some of those ships have different designs. I think they belong to other races. Dr. Alex Turner was at his science station, very excited. This is incredible. We're about to see the capital of an alien empire. Admiral Williams should be here soon, Jake said. Her fleet left Earth as soon as we sent word about the aliens. Ben Collins, the chief engineer, looked worried. Captain, I've been studying the energy readings from these ships. Their technology is amazing, but it's also very ... simple. What do you mean? Jake asked. They just use brute force for everything. Bigger engines, thicker armor, more weapons. But their designs aren't very smart. Before Jake could answer, the main screen lit up. A planet appeared in front of them, and Jake's mouth fell open. Keth Prime was enormous, much bigger than Earth. The surface was covered with huge cities made of dark metal. Giant towers reached up into the clouds, and massive. Ships moved between them like flying buildings. By the stars, Lisa whispered. How many people live there? 15 billion Kethfor, came Decanola's voice over the radio. Plus 10 billion slaves from other worlds. The word slaves made Jake's stomach turn. War Commander, did you say slaves? Of course. Weak races must serve the strong. This is the way of the galaxy. Jake and his crew exchanged worried looks. They were beginning to understand what kind of empire they had encountered. The New Horizon landed at a spaceport that was bigger than most human cities. As they walked down the ramp, Jake saw creatures he had never imagined. Some looked like giant insects with 4 arms. Others were covered in fur and walked on 6 legs. All of them wore simple clothes and carried heavy loads. Those are Zilnari, Decanol said, pointing to the insect-like beings. They are good workers, but very weak. And those are Furtick. They used to fight us, but we defeated them easily. A group of Furtick walked past, carrying metal beams. They looked tired and sad. One of them glanced at the humans, and Jake saw something in its eyes that made him angry. It was hopelessness. Dr. Turner was taking pictures of everything. War Commander. How many different races live here? 43 different types of slaves work on Keth Prime, Decanol said proudly. Each race has special jobs. Some are smart and work with computers. Others are strong and move heavy things. The ugly ones clean our buildings. And they all work for free? Jake asked carefully. They work because they must. We give them food and places to sleep. If they work well, we don't hurt them. Jake felt sick, but he knew he had to stay calm. I see. They rode in a huge vehicle through the city. The buildings were incredible. Some were miles tall and wide. But Jake noticed something else. Everything was built the same way. Big, strong, and simple. There were no decorations, no art, no signs of creativity. Your city is very practical. He said, We build things to last, Decanol replied. Beauty is weakness. Only strength matters. They stopped at the biggest building Jake had ever seen. It was like a mountain made of metal, reaching up so high that clouds formed around its top. This is the Imperial Palace, Decanol said. Emperor Vashtor wants to meet you. Inside the seeing palace, they walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Thousands of Kethver lived and worked here. They all looked the same to Jake, tall, strong, and serious. None of them smiled or talked to each other unless they had to. Finally, they reached a room that was as big as a football stadium. At the far end, on a throne made of black stone, sat the biggest Kethva Jake had ever seen. Emperor Vashtor was 12 feet tall and looked like he could crush a car with his bare hands. So, the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the huge room, these are the humans. Jake and his crew walked forward. The distance to the throne seemed to take forever. Finally, they stopped and Jake bowed slightly. Your Majesty, I am Captain Jake Morrison. We are honored to meet you. Emperor Vashtor leaned forward. That knoll tells me you are ... different. Most new races either attack us or surrender immediately. You ask to talk. Yes, Your Majesty. We believe talking is often better than fighting. Interesting. Tell me, human, what do you know of the galaxy? Jake thought carefully. We know very little, Your Majesty. We have only recently begun traveling. Between stars, we were exploring when we met your ships. Then I will teach you, the Emperor said. For 10,000 years, the Kefir have brought order to the galaxy. Before us, there was chaos. Weak races fought each other endlessly. We ended that chaos. How? Dr. Turner asked. By showing them the truth. The strong rule, the weak serve. This is the natural order. We are the strongest, so we rule all. The Emperor stood up and walked to a huge window. Outside, they could see the city stretching to the horizon. Millions of beings moved through the streets, all working, all serving. Every race in the galaxy knows this truth now, the Emperor continued. Some learned it quickly. Others had to be taught through pain. But all learned eventually. What about races that don't want to be ruled? Lisa asked. The Emperor turned back to them. Those races no longer exist. The words hung in the air, like a threat. Jake felt his crew tense up behind him. Your Majesty? Jake said slowly. Surely there must be other ways to organize society. Ways where everyone benefits, such as cooperation, working together as equals, sharing knowledge and resources. Emperor Vashtor made a sound like laughter, but it was cold and harsh. Cooperation? Equals? You speak of fairy tales, human. In the real galaxy, there are only predators and prey. But what if the prey could become something else? Jake asked, what if they could become partners? The Emperor stared at him for a long moment. You are either very wise or very foolish, human. I have not decided which. He walked back to his throne. You will stay here for 1 month. You will. See how the galaxy truly works. Then you will choose. Serve the Empire as a protected species, or be destroyed like so many others. And if we choose to serve? Jake asked. You will be given comfortable lives. Your people will work as researchers and teachers. You will not be harmed as long as you obey. And if we choose not to serve? The Emperor's eyes glowed brighter. Then, your species will be remembered only in our history books as another race that chose death over wisdom. Later that night, Jake and his crew were given rooms in a part of the palace reserved for special guests. The rooms were huge and comfortable, but Jake noticed there were no windows and only one door. We're prisoners, Lisa said quietly. Yes, Jake agreed. But we're alive, and we're learning. Learning what? Ben asked. That these aliens are monsters? Learning how their society works, Jake said. And more importantly, how it doesn't work. Dr. Turner was excited, despite their situation. Captain, I've been thinking about what we saw today. This empire is huge and powerful, but it's also very rigid. Everything is based on fear and force. What's your point? Lisa asked. My point is that fear and force make you strong in the short term, but weak in the long term. If everyone is afraid to think for themselves, who comes up with new ideas? Who solves problems in creative ways? Jake nodded slowly. That's what Ben noticed about their technology. It's powerful, but not smart. Exactly, Ben said. They just make everything bigger and stronger. But they don't innovate. They don't improve. So what do we do? Lisa asked. Jake looked out the small window in his room. He could see the city. Below, full of beings who had given up hope. But he also saw something else. Potential. We show them there's another way, he said. We show them that cooperation can be stronger than domination, that creativity can be more powerful than brute force. How do we do that? Sam asked. Jake smiled for the first time in days. We do what humans do best. We solve problems that everyone else thinks are impossible. The next morning, War Commander Thekanol came to get them. The Emperor has decided to show you the true extent of our power. You will witness a demonstration. They were taken to a huge arena where thousands of Kethvar had gathered. In the center of the arena, Jake saw something that made his heart sink. Representatives from different alien races stood in a line, all looking terrified. Today, the Emperor announced, we will show our human guests why the Kethvar are the masters of the galaxy. Jake realized they were about to watch the aliens demonstrate their power by hurting other beings. But as he looked at the faces of the other races, he saw something the Kethvar had missed. Behind the fear, there was anger. Behind the submission, there was hope. These beings hadn't forgotten what it felt like to be free. They were just waiting for someone to show them it was possible again. Jake took a deep breath. The real test was about to begin. 3 months had passed since the humans arrived on Keth Prime. Jake Morrison and his crew had been split up and sent to work in different parts of the Empire. The Kethvar wanted to see what humans could do, so they gave them jobs that seemed safe and harmless. Dr. Nina Ford stood in a huge laboratory, surrounded by alien scientists from 12 different races. The Kethvar had put her in charge of a research team, thinking that humans might be good at organizing other weak species. The energy readings are still unstable, said Vex, a Zelnari scientist with 4 arms and big compound eyes. The Kethvar method requires too much raw power. What if we tried a different approach? Nina suggested. She had been studying the work of all the different alien races. Each one had developed unique technologies before being conquered by the Kethvar. Different how? Asked Miri, a small furry Furtick who was very good with numbers. Nina pointed to the energy converter they were trying to fix. It was a Kethvar design, big, powerful, and inefficient. What if we combine Zilnari crystal technology with Furtick mathematics and human engineering principles? The alien scientists looked at each other nervously. The Kethvar told us to use their design, Vex said. But their design doesn't work very well, Nina said. Look at these readings. We're wasting 60% of the energy. She started drawing diagrams on a large screen. If we use Zilnari crystals to focus the energy, Furtick calculations to optimize the flow, and human techniques to reduce waste. That's impossible, said a deep voice from behind them. War Commander Thekanol had entered the lab. Kethvar designs are perfect. They have been tested in battle. With respect, War Commander, Nina said politely, they've been tested, but they haven't been improved. We could make this converter 50% more efficient. Efficiency is not important. Power is important. But what if you could have both? Nina asked. More power and better efficiency? Thekanol looked interested despite himself. Show me. Nina and her team worked for 6 hours, combining technologies in ways that had never been tried before. The Kethvar had always kept the different races separate, so no one had ever thought to mix their ideas. When they finished, the energy converter was producing twice as much power while using half the energy. The readings were perfect. Thekanol stared at the machine. How? By working together, Nina said. Each race has different strengths. When you combine them, you get something better than any one race could make alone. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Sergeant Tony Blake was training Kethvar security forces. The big aliens were strong and fearless, but they only knew one way to fight: charge forward and use brute force. Attack me, Tony said to a group of 10 Kethvar warriors. The warriors looked at each other and laughed. Tony was a human, small and weak compared to them. This would be easy. They all rushed at him at once. Tony waited until the last second, then moved aside. The warriors crashed into each other in a pile of arms and legs. Again, Tony said. This time, the warriors tried to surround him, but Tony had studied their movements. He knew exactly where each one would go. He rolled under. One jumped over another and used their own momentum against them. Within minutes, all 10 warriors were on the ground, confused and embarrassed. How did you do that? Asked Captain Zurich, the leader of the warriors. You are so small. I used strategy, Tony said. I watched how you move. I predicted what you would do. Then I used your strength against you. This is trickery. No, this is thinking. Your strength is your greatest advantage, but it's also your weakness. You rely on it so much that you don't develop other skills. Tony helped the warriors stand up. Want to learn how to be stronger by being smarter? The warriors looked at each other. They had never heard of such a thing, but they had also never been defeated by someone so much smaller than them. Teach us, Captain Zurich said. In the Imperial Library, Professor Carl Lee was doing something that no one had done in thousands of years. He was reading the histories of the races that the Keth-4 had defeated. The library was enormous, with records from every planet in the Empire. Most Keth-4 never came here. They weren't interested in the past, only in maintaining their power. Carl discovered something amazing. Many of the races that Keth-4 claimed to have destroyed in battle had actually been tricked into fighting each other. The Keth-4 would find 2 strong races and make them fight, then conquer whoever was left. Fascinating, he said to himself. He was not alone in the library. Several alien scholars worked there, maintaining the records. They had been watching. The human with curiosity. You read the Forbidden's histories, said an old Vorthik named Scholar Jarek. He looked like a walking tree with many arms. Forbiddens? Carl asked. The Keth-4 do not like us to remember what we were before. They want us to believe we were always weak. Carl showed Jarek what he had found. According to these records, your people, the Vorthik, had the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. You could cure diseases that no one else could even understand. Jarek's bark-like skin changed color slightly. That was long ago. We are only record keepers now. But you still remember, don't you? Carl asked. The knowledge is still there, locked away. Other scholars began to gather around them. A crystal being named Prism, a floating gas creature called Whisper, and others. They all had the same look in their eyes, the memory of what their peoples used to be. What if, Carl said carefully, there was a way to remember without being punished? What if someone was writing down these histories to preserve them? As scholars looked at each other, they had been isolated for so long. Each race kept separate from the others. But here was a human bringing them together, helping them remember their past. We will help, Scholar Jarek said quietly. Back in the lab, Nina's success with the energy converter had created a problem. Word had spread throughout the science division that the humans' mixed team was getting amazing results. Other research groups began asking for human advice. Dr. Ford, said Chief Scientist Gorvuk, a massive Keth-4. With scarred armor, your team's work is causing ... disruption. What kind of disruption? Nina asked. Other teams want to copy your methods. They want to work together like your team does. This is not how things are done. Nina looked around the lab. Her mixed team of aliens had become friends. They shared ideas freely, helped each other solve problems, and celebrated each other's successes. It was the opposite of how the Keth-4 Empire usually worked. But, sir, the results speak for themselves. We've improved 17 different systems in just 3 months. Yes, but you've also created chaos. Species that have been separated for thousands of years are now talking to each other. They're sharing information, They're asking questions. Is that bad? Gorvak's eyes glowed dangerously. It is not the Kethver way. That night, Nina met secretly with Tony and Carl. They had been exchanging messages through the alien scholars and scientists they worked with. Something's happening, Tony said. The warriors I've been training are teaching other warriors. They're questioning why they only learn to fight one way. The same thing is happening in the library, Carl said. The scholars are remembering their people's histories. They're realizing how much knowledge was lost when the Kethvar conquered them. My research teams are talking to each other across racial lines for the first time in millennia, Nina added. They're discovering that they can accomplish so much. More by working together. The Kethvar are getting nervous, Tony said. Some of the older commanders are talking about ending our experiment. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Emergency lights flashed, and they could hear Kethvar voices shouting orders. What's happening? Nina asked. A small Furtic scientist named Pip came running up to them. Dr. Ford, come quickly. There's been an accident at the mining facility. They followed Pip through the corridors. Other beings were running in the same direction. Scientists, workers, even some Kethvar. Outside, they could see a glow on the horizon where the mining facility was located. What kind of accident? Carl asked. The energy systems failed. Pip explained, the ones based on old Kethvar designs. The whole facility is breaking apart. Thousands of workers are trapped inside. When they reached the command center, chaos filled the room. Kethvar officers were shouting orders, but nothing was working. The facility was too damaged for their usual methods. We must evacuate the valuable personnel, War Commander Thekanol was saying. Leave the workers. They can be replaced. Wait, Nina said, stepping forward. What if we don't have to choose? What if we could save everyone? Impossible, Thekanol said. The facility is collapsing. Our ships cannot get close enough. But what if we used ships from different races? Small, fast ships that could get into tight spaces? And what if we coordinated the rescue using the knowledge of every species? Nina looked around the room. There were beings from dozens of different races, all with different skills and knowledge. Separately, none of them could solve this problem, but together, The Zelnari have ships that can fly through small spaces, she said. The Furtic are excellent at calculating safe paths through dangerous areas. The Vorthic know how to treat injured beings. The Crystal people can communicate instantly across long distances. And humans? Thekanol asked. Humans coordinate. We bring everyone together. 6 months after the mining rescue, the Kethvar Empire was facing something it had never dealt with before. For the first time in thousands of years, other races were refusing to obey orders. General Paul Murphy stood in the command center of the human ship Victory, which had arrived with Admiral Kate Williams' fleet. The Kethvar had allowed the human fleet to enter their space, curious about what more humans might bring. General, said Commander Kevin Wright, we're getting reports from 12 different star systems. Local populations are refusing to work. They're demanding better treatment. Paul looked at the star map. Red lights marked the rebellious systems. What started this? Word about the mining rescue spread, Kevin said. Other races learned that cooperation could solve problems that force couldn't. They started asking why they had to live like slaves. Captain Amy Johnson came onto the bridge. Sir, I just got back from the Zerion system. The situation there is ... complicated. How so? The local Kethvar commanders tried to force the workers back to their jobs. But the workers organized themselves. They're using techniques that Sergeant Blake taught the warriors. Strategy instead of just strength. Paul nodded grimly. And the Kethvar don't know how to deal with organized resistance. No, sir. They're used to races that either fight them directly or surrender completely. They don't know what to do with people who resist but don't attack. On Keth Prime, Emperor Vashtor was meeting with his war council. The huge aliens sat around the black stone table, their eyes glowing with anger and confusion. "This is intolerable," said War Commander Brutok, one of the Emperor's oldest generals. 16 systems are now in open rebellion. The humans have infected the entire empire with their weakness. "It's not weakness," said a younger voice. War Commander Thekanol spoke quietly, but everyone heard him. "I've seen what the humans can do. They saved thousands of lives when our methods failed. By tricking weak races into working together," Brutok snarled. "This proves nothing." "It proves that there are other ways to solve problems," Thekanol said. Maybe maybe there are other ways to be strong." The room fell silent. No Kethfer had ever suggested such a thing before. Emperor Vashtor looked at Thekanol with interest. "Explain. The humans don't fight the way we fight. They don't rule the way we rule, but they get results. They saved everyone in that mining disaster. They've improved our technology. They've made our warriors better fighters. By making them weak," Brutok shouted. "By making them smart," Thekanol replied. "A smart warrior who uses strategy will always defeat a strong warrior who only uses force." "This is heresy," said another general. "The strength doctrine has guided us for 10,000 years. And for 10,000 years, we've conquered races. By making them fight each other," Thekanol said, his voice growing stronger. "I've been reading the old records. We didn't defeat the Zephyrian Confederation in battle. We tricked them into a civil war and then conquered the survivors." The room erupted in angry voices. Brutok stood up, his massive frame towering over the table. "You question the honor of our greatest victory?" "I question whether it was really a victory at all," Thekanol said. "We destroyed a civilization that might have taught us new things. We turned potential allies into slaves." Emperor Vashtor raised his hand for silence. "These are dangerous thoughts, Thekanol." "Yes, Your Majesty, but they are also true thoughts." Meanwhile, in the palace library, Professor Carl Lee was meeting with Dr. Emma Watson, who had arrived with the human fleet. Emma was a diplomat, skilled at bringing different groups together. "The situation is more complex than we thought," Carl said, showing Emma his research. "The Kethfer Empire isn't just built on conquest. It's built on lies." "What do you mean?" Carl opened an ancient data file. "Look at this. The Kethfer tell everyone they defeated the mighty Zarian warriors in single combat. But the real records show they poisoned the Zarian water supply and attacked while they were sick." Emma studied the records. "They've been hiding the truth about how they really won their battles." "Exactly. And when other races learn the truth, they realize the Kethfer aren't as invincible as they pretend to be." Scholar Jarek approached them, his tree-like form moving quietly. "Dr. Watson, the other scholars want to meet with you. They have been sharing information in secret." That night, Emma found herself in a hidden room deep beneath the library. Representatives from 30 different races were there, all of them scholars and record keepers who had preserved the true histories of their peoples. "The humans have shown us that cooperation is possible," said Prism, the crystal being whose voice sounded like wind chimes. "But we need more than possibility. We need a plan." "What kind of plan?" Emma asked. "A plan to share the truth," said Whisper, the gas creature who communicated through color changes. "If all the enslaved races knew the real history, they would understand that the Kethfar are not gods. They are just another race that got lucky and used trickery." "But how do we spread the truth without being caught?" asked a small, furry being named Squeak. Emma smiled. "Leave that to us. Humans are very good at spreading information." Back in space, Captain Amy Johnson was leading a secret mission. Her ship, the Freedom, was designed to look like a Kethfer supply vessel. She was visiting rebellious systems, making contact with resistance groups. "Captain," said her communications officer, Lieutenant Ryan Clark, "we're getting a response from the Furtick underground on planet Zevo 3. Put them through." The screen showed a group of furry aliens hiding in what looked like a cave. Their leader, a Furtick named Chief Flick, looked tired but determined. "Human Captain, we heard you might help us. Is this true?" "We're here to talk," Amy said. "We can't fight your battles for you, but we can share information and advice. The Kethvar are sending more warriors to our world. They want to force us back to work in the crystal mines. But the crystals we mine are sent away to build more weapons. We get nothing." "What do your people want?" Amy asked. "Freedom to govern ourselves. Freedom to keep some of what we produce. Freedom to choose our own leaders." Amy nodded. "Those sound like reasonable requests. Have you tried negotiating with the local Kethvar commander?" Chief Flick made a sound, like bitter laughter. "Kethvar do not negotiate with weak races. They only understand force. What if you could show them that you're not weak? What if you could prove that cooperation would benefit them too?" Over the next few weeks, Amy and her team worked with resistance groups across a dozen systems. They didn't provide weapons or fight battles. Instead, they shared something much more powerful. Knowledge. They taught the rebels how to organize themselves, how to communicate across long distances, how to use nonviolent resistance to make their points. Most importantly, they shared the true histories that Carl and the scholars had uncovered. When the enslaved races learned that the Kethvar had used trickery rather than pure strength to conquer them, everything changed. The fear that had kept them obedient for thousands of years began to fade. On Keth Prime, the effects of these revelations were causing chaos in the government. Young Kethvar, who had grown up believing in the strength doctrine, were learning that their heroes had often won through deception rather than honor. War Commander Thekanol found himself leading a growing group of Kethvar who questioned the old ways. They met in secret, discussing ideas that would have been unthinkable just months before. "The humans have shown us that there are other definitions of strength," Thekanol said to his followers. "Maybe strength isn't about dominating others. Maybe it's about building something together." "But what would we build?" asked a young commander named Varric. "The Empire is all we know." "We could build something better," Thekanol said. "Something based on cooperation instead of fear." However, not all Kethvar were ready for such ideas. War Commander Brutok and his followers were planning their own response to the crisis. "The humans are a disease," Brutok told his loyal commanders. "They spread weakness wherever they go. There is only one cure for disease." "What do you propose?" asked General Korath. "We destroy the humans and anyone infected by their ideas. We remind the galaxy why the Kethvar are masters." "The Emperor hasn't authorized this," warned another general. "The Emperor has become weak," Brutok said darkly. "He listens to Thekanol's poisonous words. If he will not act, then we must act for him." The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of the galaxy. On one side stood those who believed in the old ways of domination and fear. On the other side were those who had learned that cooperation and trust could create something stronger than any empire built on force. That in the middle were the humans, who had never intended to start a revolution, but had simply done what came naturally to them. They had treated other beings as equals and worked together to solve problems. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for such a radical change, or whether the old ways would crush this new hope before it could grow. The answer would come soon, and it would change the course of galactic history forever. 1 year after first contact, the galaxy was burning, not with weapons or war, but with the fire of change. President Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the human flagship Unity, watching as history unfolded before her eyes. Maria had been elected leader of the Human Colonial Alliance when the crisis began. She was a calm, thoughtful woman who believed that even the biggest problems could be solved through patience and cooperation. "Madam President," said Admiral Jake Morrison, who had been promoted after his successful first contact mission, "we're receiving surrender messages from Kethver commanders in 47 systems." "Surrender?" Maria asked. "Not to us, ma'am. To their own people. Local populations have taken control of their governments. The Kethver commanders are giving up rather than fight." Ambassador Laura Hill approached with a report. "The situation is changing faster than we can track it. The Kethver Empire has officially dissolved. Emperor Vashtor abdicated 3 hours ago." Maria felt a mix of amazement and worry. "What about the Kethver military? Are they accepting this?" "Some are," Jake said. "Thekanol and his followers have joined the new Galactic Cooperation Council. But War Commander Brutok has declared himself the true leader of the Kethver. He's gathered a fleet of loyalists. How many ships? 200 vessels, including their largest warships. They're calling themselves the True Empire." Maria nodded grimly. "So we're not done yet." The Galactic Cooperation Council was meeting on a neutral space station called Hope, which had been quickly built by volunteers from dozens of races. Dr. Ryan Clark, now the Council's coordinator, was trying to bring order to the most diverse gathering in galactic history. The Zarian delegation wants guarantees of self-governance. Ryan announced to the crowded chamber. The Furtick are demanding reparations for 1,000 years of forced labor. The Zilnari want access to advanced medical technology. Thekanol, now representing the reformed Kethfor, spoke up. "These are all reasonable requests. But we must also address the immediate crisis. Brutok's fleet is attacking any system that joins the Council." A small Furtick named Chief Flick stood up. "Many of our worlds have no defenses. For thousands of years, the Kethver didn't allow us to have weapons. How can we protect ourselves?" "The same way humans protected themselves," said Dr. Nina Ford, who had become the Council's chief science advisor. "Through cooperation and smart planning." "Explain," said Prism. The crystal being Nina activated a holographic display. "No single race has enough ships to fight Brutok's fleet, but together we have thousands of vessels. They're mostly small cargo ships and transports, but if we coordinate them properly." "You want civilians to fight trained warriors?" asked a skeptical voice from the back. "I want smart people to outthink brutal people," Nina replied. "Brutok and his followers still believe that the biggest, strongest force always wins. But we've learned that's not true." Meanwhile, on his flagship Dominator, War Commander Brutok was planning his campaign to restore Kethfor rule. His bridge was filled with old guard Kethfor commanders who refused to accept the changes happening around them. "The rebellion has spread to over 300 systems," reported General Korath. "But most of these worlds are defenseless. We can reconquer them easily." "Good," Brutok said. "We'll start with the Furtick colonies. They were always the most troublesome slaves. A few examples of Kethver justice will remind the others why they should obey." "What about the humans?" asked another commander. "Their fleet is small but well armed. The humans are the source of this infection," Brutok growled. "Once we destroy them, the other races will remember their place. And if Thekanol's Kethvar try to stop us," Brutok's eyes glowed with anger, "then they will die as traitors." The first battle of the new galactic war came sooner than anyone expected. Brutok's fleet attacked the Zavo system, where Chief Flick's people lived. But they found something they weren't prepared for. The Furtick weren't alone. Ships from 30 different races had come to help defend the system. They weren't warships. Most were cargo haulers, passenger transports, and mining vessels. But They were organized. Captain Amy Johnson was coordinating the defense from her ship. Remember, we're not trying to win a traditional battle. We're trying to prove that cooperation works. How do we do that? Asked Captain Sophie Grant, commanding a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels. By saving everyone, Amy replied. Every civilian, every worker, everyone on both sides who doesn't want to fight. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of two fleets smashing into each other, it became a complex dance of strategy and rescue operations. Brutox. Warships were powerful, but they were designed to fight other warships. They didn't know how to deal with hundreds of small, fast ships that worked together like a school of fishdot, while the warships chased some vessels. Others slipped past to evacuate civilians. When the Kethver tried to surround the defenders, smaller ships scattered and regrouped elsewhere. Most importantly, several of Brutox's own ships began to surrender. The crews included many younger Kethver who had grown up hearing stories of their people's honor and strength. When they saw their commanders attacking defenseless civilians, they couldn't follow orders anymore. This is not what Kethver warriors are supposed to do, said one young captain over the radio. We're supposed to protect the weak, not slaughter them. The battle ended with Brutok retreating, but not before the defenders had rescued over 1 million civilians from both sides. The galaxy watched in amazement as former enemies worked together to save lives. But the larger conflict was just beginning. Brutok's true empire controlled nearly a quarter of the old Kethvar fleet, and they were getting more desperate and violent with each defeat. The crisis reached its peak when long-range sensors detected something terrible. A massive stellar event was about to occur in the Kepler sector. 12 suns were going to explode in a chain reaction that would destroy everything within 50 light years. How many inhabited systems are in the danger zone? President Santos asked Dr. Ryan Clark. 47 systems containing over 20 billion people, Ryan replied, his face pale. Humans, Kethver, Furtick, Zilnare, and dozens of other races. How long do we have? 6 weeks before the first star explodes. After that, the chain reaction will spread quickly. Admiral Jake Morrison studied the tactical display. Even with every ship in the galaxy, we can't evacuate that many people in 6 weeks. Not with conventional methods, agreed Lara Hill. Then, we need unconventional methods, Maria said. Ryan, call an emergency session of the Galactic Council. We need every race, every ship, every idea we can get. The meeting that followed brought together the largest collection of different species in galactic history. The chamber on Hope Station was filled with beings of every shape and size, all facing the same terrible deadline. The old empire would have evacuated only the most valuable worlds, Decanol said sadly. Billions would have been left to die. That's not an option, Maria said firmly. We save everyone, or we save no one. Dr. Nina Ford stood up. I have an idea, but it will require perfect cooperation between every race. We're listening, said Chief Flick. Each race has developed different technologies over thousands of years. The Zilnari have the fastest ships. The Furtick are the best at calculating safe routes through dangerous space. The Vorthik have medical facilities that can treat any injury. The Crystal people can communicate instantly across any distance. And the Kethver? Asked Prism. The Kethver have the biggest cargo ships and the most experience with large-scale operations, Nina said, looking at Decanol. If we combine all these technologies and coordinate perfectly, it might be possible, Decanol said slowly, but it would require trust between races that have been enemies for millennia. Do we have a choice? Asked Whisper. The answer was no. Over the next 6 weeks, the galaxy witnessed the most incredible rescue operation in history. Ships from hundreds of races worked together in perfect harmony. Former slaves and former masters labored side by side to save lives. The Zilnari used their fast ships to scout safe routes through the dangerous stellar phenomenon. The Furtick calculated evacuation schedules with mathematical precision. The Vorthik set up medical stations to treat the injured and sick. Humans coordinated the entire operation, making sure every piece fit together. They had become what they were naturally good at, bringing different people together to solve impossible problems. Even War Commander Brutak's true empire joined the rescue effort. When faced with the choice between ideology and saving lives, most of his followers chose compassion. Brutak himself appeared on the communication screen during the final week of evacuations. The proud warrior looked old and tired. "I was wrong," he said simply. "The humans have shown us a strength we never understood. I offer my ships to help with the rescue." The evacuation succeeded. Every person in the danger zone was saved. Over 20 billion beings from hundreds of different races. They were relocated to safe worlds, where many species that had never met before became neighbors and friends. 5 years later, President Maria Santos stood on the observation deck of the exploration ship New Dawn. The vessel was crewed by members of 50 different species, all working together to explore the unknown regions of the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison, now an older and wiser man. Admiral Korath Vex stood on the bridge of his crystal ship, watching the stars bend around him like servants. His tall, blue-skinned form glowed with inner light, and his golden eyes could see across vast distances. For 3,000 years, his people had ruled this part of space. Every species they met called them gods, and why wouldn't they? The Zephyrians could move objects with their minds, live for centuries, and make their ships appear from nowhere like magic. "My lord," said his second-in-command, bowing low. "The outer worlds send their monthly tribute. The Krellans offer their finest metals. The Vortaki present their young for your blessing." Korath nodded. This was how things should be. 47. Different alien species across hundreds of worlds all worshipped his people. They built temples, offered prayers, and gave up their best resources. In return, the Zephyrians protected them from pirates and other threats. It was a good system that had worked for thousands of years. But today brought strange news. "There are reports from the Rim worlds," his officer continued, his voice nervous. "A new species has been found. They call themselves humans." "Another primitive race," Korath said without interest. "Send the usual fleet. They will kneel like all the others." "My lord, these humans are different. They have advanced ships. When our scouts demanded worship, they they laughed." Korath's glowing eyes flashed. "Laughed? Yes, my lord. They seemed confused by our divine presence. One of their leaders said something about getting in line behind something called the IRS. This was troubling. In all of Korath's long life, no species had ever been confused by Zephyrian divinity. Most fell to their knees the moment they saw a crystal ship appear. The psychic pressure alone usually made primitive minds collapse in worship out far across space. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Defiant. His ship was small compared to the massive carriers back home, but it was tough. And fast. Morrison was 42 years old, with graying hair and tired eyes. He had spent the last 5 years exploring unknown space, mapping new systems for Earth's colonial expansion. "Captain," called his navigation officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, "we're picking up some unusual energy readings from the next system." "Over." "Unusual how?" Amy frowned at her screens. "The signatures don't match any known technology. The energy patterns are almost organic, like they're alive." Morrison leaned forward. "Any signs of ships?" "3 contacts, moving in formation. They're big, sir. Each one is about the size of a battlecruiser." "Red alert," Morrison ordered. All hands to battle stations. Amy tried to get a visual. The main screen flickered, then showed 3 ships unlike anything in human records. They looked like they were made of crystal and light, with smooth curves that hurt to look at directly. They moved without any visible engines, gliding through space like swimming fish. "They're hailing us," reported the communications officer. "Put them through." The screen changed to show a tall, glowing figure. Admiral Korath Vex appeared in all his divine glory, his form radiating power and authority. His voice echoed with harmonics that should have driven lesser beings to their knees. "Mortals," Korath proclaimed, "you are in the presence of divine beings. I am Admiral Korath Vex of the Zephyrian Empire. Bow before our glory and prepare to offer tribute." Morrison blinked. "Tribute? Your finest resources, your most valuable goods, and the acknowledgement of our godhood. All species serve the Zephyrians. We are the light that guides the darkness, the power that shapes reality itself." Morrison scratched his head. "Look, buddy, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but we're just here to map star systems. We're not looking for trouble." Korath's eyes blazed brighter. "Scam? You dare speak to a god with such disrespect?" "God?" Morrison almost smiled. "Right. Well, you'll have to get in line behind the IRS, the DMV, and my ex-wife if you want worship from me." Amy Foster watched her sensor readings with growing interest. The alien ships were putting out massive energy signatures, but the patterns were familiar once you looked past the fancy light show. "Captain," she said quietly, "their shield harmonics are similar to our deflector array technology. Different power source, but the basic principles are the same." Morrison nodded slightly. These aliens had advanced technology, but they weren't actually gods. They just wanted everyone to think they were. "Your insolence will not be tolerated," Korath declared. "We will demonstrate our divine power. Your minds will break before our psychic might." Morrison felt a strange pressure in his head, like someone was trying to push thoughts into his brain. It was uncomfortable, but not unbearable. He had felt worse headaches after drinking too much coffee. "Is that it?" Morrison asked. "Because I've got a splitting headache from my morning briefing, that's worse than whatever you're doing." Korath was shocked. The psychic attack that could paralyze entire fleets had barely affected this human. Impossible. No mortal mind can resist divine influence. "Look, we really don't want any trouble," Morrison said. "How about we all just go our separate ways and pretend this didn't happen?" "There will be no mercy for blasphemers," Korath snarled. "You will learn to fear the gods." The crystal ships began to glow brighter, energy building in their strange weapons. Morrison sighed and turned to his tactical officer. "Well, we tried being polite. Amy, what do you think? Can we take them?" Amy studied her readings. "Their ships are big and pretty, but their weapon systems don't look that different from Centauri plasma cannons. We should be able to handle them. You hear that?" Morrison called to the alien admiral. "My tactical officer thinks we can handle you." She's usually right about these things. Korath had never encountered anything like this. Where was the fear? Where was the awe? These humans treated him like he was just another alien with fancy technology. It was impossible and insulting. "Destroy them," he ordered his fleet, the first. Battle was brief. The Zephyrian ships fired beams of pure energy that could melt asteroids, but the USS Defiant's shields held. Morrison's crew worked with calm efficiency, treating the divine wrath like any other enemy attack. "Their weapons are powerful, but slow to recharge," Amy reported. "We can get between their firing cycles." The Defiant dove and weaved between the energy beams, its pulse cannons finding weak spots in the crystal ship's defenses. One Zephyrian vessel took heavy damage and retreated. The other two held formation, but seemed confused by human tactics. "This is impossible," Korath muttered. "They should be cowering in terror." Instead, the humans were taking detailed sensor readings of his ships and discussing shield frequencies like they were analyzing a technical manual. It was the most insulting thing that had ever happened to him. Morrison opened communications. "Again, listen, we don't want to fight, but we will if you keep shooting at us. How about we call this a draw and go home?" Korath stared at the human captain. This mortal had just fought gods to a standstill and was offering to call it even. The concept was so alien that Korath couldn't process it. "This is not over," he finally said, and ordered his remaining ships to retreat out as the crystal vessels disappeared. Morrison turned to his crew. "Well, that was interesting. Amy, make sure we get all those sensor readings to Fleet Command. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing more of these people." The first crack had appeared in the Zephyrian Empire, though they didn't know it yet. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone had looked at their gods and seen only advanced. Aliens with fancy ships, and that someone had not been impressed. High Priestess Lirelei paced through the sacred halls of the god temple, her silver robes flowing behind her. The crystal walls around her pulsed with soft light, responding to her agitated thoughts. For 3,000 years, she had helped maintain the divine illusion that kept 47 species worshipping the Zephyrians. Now that perfect system was under threat. "The reports are confirmed," she said to the assembled council of divine arbitrators. "The humans show complete immunity, too. Our psychic influence. Worse, they treat our manifestations of power as mere technology." Elder God Naltos, ancient even by Zephyrian standards, leaned forward on his throne. "How is this possible? No species has ever resisted our divine presence." "I don't know," Lirelei admitted, "but Admiral Korath's encounter has already caused problems. 3 subject species have begun asking questions about our true nature. The Krellans want to know why their gods couldn't defeat a single human ship. The implications were terrifying. The Zephyrian Empire had grown soft over the millennia, dependent on worship and tribute from primitive worlds. If their subjects realized they weren't actually gods, the entire system would collapse. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison's report had reached Admiral Patricia Davis aboard the massive carrier USS Independence. Davis was a veteran of 23 years. In Earth's Navy, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had fought in the Centauri conflicts, battled space pirates, and negotiated with hostile alien species. Nothing in her experience had prepared her to deal with aliens who thought they were gods. "So they actually believe they're divine?" she asked her intelligence officer, Commander Nick Stone. "It seems that way, Admiral. They've maintained this illusion across multiple star systems for thousands of years. 47 different species pay them tribute and worship them as gods." Davis studied the tactical reports. "But they're not actually gods. They're just an advanced alien species using psychological warfare and superior technology." "Exactly. And Captain Morrison proved they can be fought and beaten using conventional tactics." Davis nodded thoughtfully. The situation was more complex than a simple first contact. These Zephyrians had built an empire based on lies and intimidation. If humanity could expose them, it might free dozens of oppressed species. "What's our current strength in the sector?" "The Independence Battle Group, plus 3 destroyer squadrons and 2 cruiser wings. Admiral Parker's fleet is 2 weeks out if we need reinforcement." "Good. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've encountered a species that has enslaved multiple worlds through false claims of divinity. Request permission to intervene." The Zephyrians weren't waiting for human permission. Admiral Korath had convinced the God Council that swift action was needed. They would launch a divine punishment campaign against human colonies, demonstrating their power so overwhelming that even these strange immune humans would have to submit. The first target was New Phoenix, a mining colony in the Outer Rim. The settlement had 8,000 colonists and minimal defenses. It should have been an easy victory that would restore Zephyrian prestige. Commander Lisa Park was having her morning coffee when the attack began. She was the colony's security chief, a former Marine who had retired to the outer worlds for a quiet life. That quiet life ended when 3 massive crystal ships appeared in orbit and began broadcasting demands for surrender. "People of this world," boomed the voice of war god Nexus Prime, "you have harbored blasphemers who dare defy divine will. Submit now and accept judgment, or face total annihilation." Lisa put down her coffee and activated the emergency protocols. "All civilians to the shelters. Defense Force, man your positions. And someone get me a sensor reading on those ships." The colony's chief engineer, Ben Carter, was already at work in the command center. Ben was the kind of man who could fix anything, with spare parts and determination. He looked at the incoming energy signatures with professional interest. "Those are some fancy plasma conduits," he muttered, adjusting his scanner settings. "Power source is weird, but the delivery system is just advanced particle projection. Can we fight them?" Lisa asked. "Maybe. Their weapons are powerful, but they seem to have long recharge cycles. If we can survive the first barrage, we might have a chance." The Zephyrians had expected immediate surrender. Instead, they found a human colony that treated their divine proclamations like a standard raid warning. The colonists went to prepared shelters. The Defense Force took positions behind energy barriers, and someone was actually scanning their ships for technical specifications. War God Nexus Prime was offended. These mortals dare analyze divine power? Show them the futility of resistance. The crystal ships opened fire with beams of concentrated energy that could level mountains. The human shields flickered but held. The colonists didn't panic or pray for mercy. They just waited for the weapons to recharge and then fired back with everything they had. Ben Carter had rigged the mining lasers to work as weapons, linking them to the colony's main power grid. When the Zephyrian shields proved resistant to conventional fire, he began experimenting with different frequencies and harmonics. "Try rotating the pulse pattern," he called to his team. Their shield matrix has a resonance gap at 700 terahertz. Lisa coordinated the defense from the command bunker, treating the attacking gods like any other hostile force. She called for ammunition resupply, organized evacuation routes, and requested backup from the nearest patrol fleet. At no point did she consider surrendering to divine authority. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Zephyrians threw everything they had at the small colony, expecting the humans to break under divine wrath. Instead, they found opponents who adapted their tactics in real time, shared technical data during combat, and treated impossible odds as a logistical challenge. "Status report," Lisa demanded, as another energy barrage shook the command center. "Shields." "At 60%, reported her tactical officer. "Ben's modifications are working. Their weapons are losing effectiveness." "Casualties?" "Surprisingly light. The colonists are following evacuation procedures perfectly, and our defensive positions are holding." "Good. How long until the patrol fleet arrives?" "Admiral Davis is 2 hours out with the Independence Battle Group." Lisa nodded and opened communications to the Zephyrian fleet. "This is Commander Lisa Park of New Phoenix Colony. You've been shooting at us for 6 hours and haven't accomplished much. Our reinforcements will be here soon. Last chance to surrender peacefully." War God Nexus Prime stared at the communication screen in shock. A mortal was offering him the chance to surrender. The concept was so foreign that his mind couldn't process. "It's impossible," he whispered. "We are gods. This cannot be happening." When Admiral Davis arrived with the Independence Battle Group, she found the Zephyrian attack fleet in disarray. The gods who had expected easy victory were instead facing organized human resistance that refused to acknowledge their divinity. Admiral, called her communications officer, Lieutenant Grace Murphy, were getting some weird transmissions from the alien fleet. They keep talking about divine authority and mortal insolence. Put me through to their commander, Davis ordered, War God. Nexus Prime appeared on screen in his full divine aspect, energy wreathing his form and his voice echoing with harmonic power. I am Nexus Prime, God of war and divine justice. Your species has committed blasphemy against the eternal order. Prepare for judgment. Davis listened patiently, then turned to her aide, Colonel Tim Brooks. Schedule a formal surrender ceremony and prepare documentation for war crimes tribunals. These people have been enslaving multiple species for thousands of years. Yes, Admiral. Should I contact the JAG office about proper procedures for prosecuting self-proclaimed deities? Good thinking. We'll need to document everything properly. Nexus. Prime listened to this exchange with growing horror. These humans were discussing his divine authority like it was a legal matter. They were planning to put gods on trial for war crimes. You cannot judge the divine, he protested. We are beyond mortal law. Everyone's beyond the law until they get caught, Davis replied. You've been running a protection racket across multiple star systems. That's going to require some paperwork. The second major engagement of the war lasted 3 days and ended with complete human victory. The Zephyrians retreated in confusion, their divine authority shattered by opponents who treated their gods like particularly annoying aliens with fancy technology. In the aftermath, Admiral Davis sent her preliminary report to Earth Command. Under Enemy Capabilities Assessment, she noted that the Zephyrians possessed advanced technology and impressive psychological warfare capabilities, but showed poor adaptability when their primary tactics proved ineffective. Her recommendation was simple. Standard first contact protocols appear sufficient for future encounters with self-proclaimed deities. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled through fear and awe for 3,000 years. Now they faced an enemy that was completely immune to both. For the first time in their long history, the gods were afraid. The USS Independence hung in space like a metal fortress, surrounded by the scattered wreckage of 3 different battles. Admiral Patricia Davis stood on the bridge, studying the tactical displays that showed Zephyrian fleet movements across the sector. In just 2 weeks, everything had changed. The gods were running scared, and their subject species were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Admiral, reported Commander Nick Stone, we've got intelligence reports from 16 different worlds. The Zephyrians are pulling back their temple ships and consolidating their fleets. It looks like they're preparing for something big. Davis nodded. She had expected this. When you spent 3,000 years convincing everyone you were divine, having mortals kicked your teeth in was bound to cause problems. What about their subject species? Mixed reactions. Some are still loyal, but others are starting to rebel. The Krullans have stopped sending tribute. The Vortaki are asking questions about Zephyrian technology. 3 species have requested formal contact with us. Good. How long before their main fleet arrives? Our scouts report a massive force gathering near their homeworld. At least 60. Capital ships, maybe more. They'll be here within the week. Davis turned to her science officer, Dr. Helen Price. Helen was a thin woman with sharp eyes who had spent her career studying alien technology. She had been analyzing captured Zephyrian equipment for days. What have you learned about their capabilities? Helen pulled up her reports. They're advanced, but not impossibly so. Their energy manipulation is based on crystalline matrices that focus psychic energy into physical effects. Their shields use harmonic resonance to deflect attacks. Their weapons are powerful, but have obvious limitations, such as long recharge times, limited targeting systems, and they're designed more for intimidation than actual warfare. These people haven't fought a real war in centuries. They're used to enemies that surrender the moment they show up. Davis smiled grimly. Then they're in for a surprise. The Zephyrian war fleet was indeed massive. War god Nexus Prime had assembled. Every divine vessel in the Empire, from the smallest temple ships to the great cathedral-class dreadnoughts that could level planets. At the center of the formation flew the personal flagship of God Emperor Azrael himself, a crystal mountain that blazed with the light of captured stars. Admiral Korath Vex stood beside his emperor, watching the human fleet on the long-range sensors. The USS Independence and her battle group looked tiny compared to the assembled might of the gods. They have 23 ships, Korath reported. We have 68. They cannot possibly stand against us. Azrael was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, his form wreathed in energy that bent light around him. He had not left his homeworld in over a century, but these upstart humans had forced his hand. Their resistance ends today. We will demonstrate such power that even their strange minds will break. My lord, said High Priestess Lirelei, perhaps we should attempt negotiation first. If we can make them understand our divine nature, no. Azrael's voice shook the bridge. They have seen our power and remained defiant. They have corrupted our subjects with their blasphemy. They must be destroyed completely. The final battle began near the gas giant Kronos, where the Independence battle group had taken position. Among the asteroid fields, Admiral Davis had chosen the location carefully, using the gravitational effects and debris fields to limit the Zephyrians' numerical advantage. When the God fleet arrived, it was a sight that should have struck terror into any mortal heart. 68 ships of crystalline light, each one blazing with divine power, arranged in a formation that blocked out the stars themselves. At their head came Azrael's flagship, reality bending around it as it moved through space. Holy cow, muttered Lieutenant Grace Murphy at the communications station. That's a lot of ships. Language, Lieutenant, Davis said mildly. We're about to fight gods. Let's keep it professional. Communications Officer Ryan Scott looked up from his console. Admiral, they're hailing us. The energy signature is off the charts. Put them through. A main screen filled with the image of God Emperor Azrael in all his terrible glory. His form was barely visible through the energies that surrounded him, and his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Mortals, he proclaimed, you have defied the natural order of the universe. You have raised your hands against gods and turned our children against us. For this blasphemy you will be unmade. Your very atoms will be scattered across the void. Davis listened politely, then turned to her aide. Colonel Brooks, is there a form for this? Threats of atomic scattering probably require some kind of incident report. Colonel Tim Brooks checked his tablet. I'll have to look it up, Admiral. This is pretty specific language. Azrael stared at them in disbelief. You dare mock divine judgment with bureaucracy? Not mocking, Davis replied. Just following proper procedures. If you're going to threaten to scatter our atoms, we need to file the appropriate paperwork. There are safety regulations about that sort of thing. Chief Tactical Officer Ryan Scott was studying his sensor readings with professional interest. Admiral, their flagship is putting out massive energy signatures. But the patterns are similar to what we've seen before. Bigger scale, same basic principles. Can we handle it? Should be doable. Their weapons are still slow to recharge, and they seem to prioritize spectacular effects over tactical efficiency. Davis nodded and opened fleet communications. All ships, this is Admiral Davis. We are engaged with a hostile force of 68 vessels. They call themselves gods, but our analysis suggests they're just aliens with fancy technology. Treat them accordingly. Engage at will. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The Zephyrians unleashed the full fury of divine wrath, filling space with energy beams that could crack moons and gravitational distortions that warped reality itself. They expected the humans to break and run in the face of such overwhelming power. Instead, they found opponents who treated divine manifestations as targeting solutions. When war god Nexus Prime split his flagship into multiple aspects to confuse human sensors, Ryan Scott simply updated his targeting computer and requested permission to engage multiple hostiles. Splitting into 3 ships just gives us more targets, he reported calmly, adjusting fire control accordingly. Captain Morrison, now commanding a destroyer squadron, used the asteroid field to redirect Zephyrian energy attacks back at their own fleet. When the gods hurled lightning that could shatter worlds, the humans used gravitational lensing to turn it into a weapon against its creators. Nice light show, Morrison commented as a massive energy beam missed his ship by meters. Amy, can we use their own power against them? Lieutenant Amy Foster, now his tactical officer, was already working on it. Yes, sir. Their weapons are so powerful, they're causing gravitational distortions. We can use those to redirect their fire. Dr. Helen Price watched the battle from the Independence's science station, taking detailed readings of every Zephyrian weapon system. When God Emperor Azrael unleashed his most devastating attack, a beam of pure destruction that could unmake matter itself, she calmly adjusted her sensors and began analyzing the energy patterns. Interesting, she muttered. It's not actually destroying matter, just converting it to energy. The process is reversible if you know the right frequencies. Admiral Davis overheard her. Can we defend against it? Already working on it. I'll have a countermeasure in 10 minutes. The Zephyrians had never encountered enemies like this. Their most terrible weapons were met with scientific curiosity. Their divine fury was analyzed and catalogued. When they unleashed powers that had cowed civilizations, the humans asked if they could get better sensor readings. Admiral Korath watched his empire's greatest fleet being systematically dismantled by 23 human ships. It was impossible, but it was happening. The humans showed no fear, no awe, no recognition of Zephyrian divinity. They fought gods with the same calm efficiency they would use against space pirates. My lord, he said, to Azrael, perhaps we should withdraw, regroup, and try a different approach. No, Azrael raged. I will not retreat before mortals. Observe my ultimate power. The God Emperor began to glow brighter than a star, energy pouring from his flagship in waves that made space itself scream. He was preparing to unleash the God Killer, a weapon that could destroy entire solar systems. It was forbidden, dangerous, and had never been used in battle. Admiral Davis watched the energy build up with interest. That's new. Helen, what do you make of it? Dr. Price studied her readings. Big, but unstable. He's drawing power from his ship's core systems. If we can disrupt the energy flow, the whole thing might collapse. Can we do that? Give me 2 minutes. As Azrael prepared to destroy the human fleet with divine power beyond mortal comprehension, Dr. Helen Price calmly calculated the precise frequency needed to destabilize his weapon. When she found it, she turned to Admiral Davis. Ready when? You are, Admiral. Davis smiled. After 3,000 years of terrorizing the galaxy, the gods were about to learn what happened when they met humans who weren't impressed by their light show. Fire, she ordered. The countermeasure beam struck Azrael's flagship just as he unleashed the God Killer. The unstable energies collapsed back on themselves, overloading the crystal ship systems, and the crystal halls of the God Temple were darker than they had been in 3,000 years. High Priestess Lirelei walked through the sacred chambers where once the light of divine authority had blazed eternal. Now the walls flickered with uncertain energy, responding to the fear and confusion that filled every Zephyrian mind. The impossible had happened. The gods had been defeated by mortals. "The fleet is returning," reported Elder God Malthus, his ancient form trembling with shock. 43 ships lost or damaged. God Emperor Azrael's flagship is barely functional. The humans destroyed the God-killer weapon and treated our ultimate manifestation of power like a technical malfunction. Lirelai stared at the tactical displays showing the retreat. For 3 millennia, Zephyrian fleets had swept across the galaxy, demanding worship and receiving it. Now they limped home, broken by 23 human ships that had fought them, with the casual efficiency of exterminators dealing with pests. "How many of our subject species have received reports of the battle?" "All of them," Malthus said quietly. "The humans broadcast the entire engagement on open channels. Every world that has worshipped us for centuries watched their gods retreat in defeat. The rebellion had already begun. The Krellans had seized their tribute ships and declared independence. The Vortaki were dismantling their temples and asking for technical assistance from Earth. 12 other species had formally requested protection from human forces. The Empire was collapsing as word spread that the gods could bleed. Admiral Patricia Davis received the surrender request 3 days after the Battle of Kronos. She was in her quarters, reviewing casualty reports and damage assessments, when Colonel Tim Brooks knocked on her door. "Admiral, we've got an incoming transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld. It's from their Emperor." Davis set down her coffee and straightened her uniform. "Put it through to the conference room. And Tim, make sure. We're recording everything. This is going to be historic." God Emperor Azrael appeared on the main screen, but he was a shadow of his former divine glory. His energy wreath had dimmed to barely visible flickers, and his voice no longer echoed with harmonic power. He looked like what he had always been. Beneath the illusion, an old alien who had lived too long on the worship of others. "Admiral Davis of the human fleet," he began, each word clearly difficult for him to speak. "We... The Zephyrian Empire requests formal negotiations for the cessation of hostilities." Davis studied him with professional interest. "Are you surrendering?" The word hung in the air like a curse. In 3,000 years, no Zephyrian had ever spoken it. The concept was so alien to their nature that Azrael's form flickered as he struggled to say it. "We... acknowledge that the current conflict cannot be resolved through divine intervention." "So you're surrendering," Davis repeated patiently. "We are... requesting... diplomatic resolution." Colonel Brooks leaned over to Davis. "Should I prepare the standard surrender documentation?" "Yes, but we'll need to modify it. Add a section about claims of divinity and include provisions for war crimes tribunals. These people have been enslaving entire species for millennia." Azrael watched this exchange with growing horror. The humans were discussing his surrender like it was a routine administrative task. They were planning to put gods on trial as common criminals. "You cannot judge divine beings," he protested weakly. "We are beyond mortal law." Lieutenant Commander Kate Johnson, Davis's legal officer, looked up from her tablet. "Sir, we'll need to determine your actual legal status first. Are you claiming diplomatic immunity based on divinity? Because we don't recognize that as a valid legal doctrine. You'll need to file the proper forms." "Forms?" "Yes, sir. Department of Existential Threats has specific procedures for this kind of thing. I can send you the paperwork." Admiral Korath Vex watched his Emperor's humiliation from the bridge of his damaged flagship. The proud Zephyrian leader, who had once commanded the worship of billions, was being given bureaucratic forms to fill out by human clerks. "My lord," he said quietly, "perhaps we should consider their terms." Azrael's form flickered with the last remnants of his divine fury. "Never. I am the God Emperor of the Zephyrian Empire. I will not submit to mortal judgment." But even as he spoke, reports were coming in from across the empire. The Kandorian Collective had declared independence and was requesting human protection. The Thraxian Republic was dismantling their god temples and converting them to schools. The Milleran species was asking Earth for technical assistance in building their own space fleet. The psychological foundation of Zephyrian power was crumbling. For 3,000 years, they had ruled through fear and awe. Once their subjects realized they were just another alien species with advanced technology, the illusion could never be rebuilt. Helen Price was in her laboratory aboard the Independence, studying captured Zephyrian technology with scientific fascination. The crystalline matrices that had once seemed like divine artifacts were revealing their secrets under proper analysis. "It's actually quite elegant," she told Admiral Davis during their daily briefing. "They use psychic energy to manipulate matter. At the quantum level, the crystals act as amplifiers and focusing devices. Very advanced, but not magical. Can we replicate it? Eventually. The principles are sound, but it would take years to develop the manufacturing techniques. Their technology is based on organic crystalline growth that we don't fully understand yet." Davis nodded. The strategic implications were significant. If humanity could master Zephyrian technology, it would revolutionize space travel and planetary defense. But that was a concern for the future. Right now, she had to deal with the immediate problem of what to do with a fallen empire. The formal surrender ceremony took place aboard the Independence 1 week later. God Emperor Azrael arrived in a small shuttle, his divine flagship too damaged to make the journey. He was accompanied by Admiral Koreth and High Priestess Lirelai, both looking like they were attending their own execution. The ceremony was held in the ship's main conference room, with representatives from Earth Command attending via holographic link. Admiral Davis had prepared extensively for this moment, consulting with diplomatic experts and legal scholars about the proper procedures for accepting surrender from self-proclaimed deities. "This is Admiral Patricia Davis of the United Earth Fleet," she began formally. "We are here to accept the surrender of the Zephyrian Empire and to establish terms for the cessation of hostilities." Azrael stood before the conference table, his once mighty form reduced to little more than a tall, tired alien. The energy that had once made him seem godlike was gone, leaving behind someone who looked very old and very defeated. "I am Azrael, ORMER, ruler of the Zephyrian Empire," he said slowly. "I formally surrender all military forces under my command and acknowledge the authority of the human fleet in this matter." Davis nodded and activated her recording device. "For the record, you are surrendering unconditionally?" "Yes. And you renounce all claims of divinity?" Azrael's form flickered one last time. Yes. We are not gods." "We never were." The words seemed to physically pain him. 3,000 years of carefully maintained illusion died in that moment. High Priestess Lirelai made a sound like a sob, while Admiral Koreth stared at the floor in shame. "Very well," Davis said. "The terms of surrender are as follows. All Zephyrian military forces will stand down immediately. All tribute collection from subject species will cease. All claims of divine authority are to be publicly renounced. War crimes tribunals will be established for those responsible for the enslavement and exploitation of 47 species." "War crimes?" Koreth looked up in alarm. Lieutenant Commander Kate Johnson consulted her notes. "You've been running what amounts to a protection racket across multiple star systems for 3 millennia. That's going to require extensive legal proceedings." "But we protected them," Lirelai protested. "We maintained order, prevented wars between species, provided technological advancement through intimidation and false claims of divinity," Davis interrupted. "You enslaved entire civilizations by convincing them you are gods. That's not protection, that's exploitation." The formal proceedings continued for 2 hours, with human lawyers carefully documenting every aspect of Zephyrian surrender. Aliens who had once demanded worship from billions were now signing legal documents and agreeing to submit to mortal courts. When it was over, Azrael sat in the shuttle and would take him back to his homeworld, staring out at the human fleet. Admiral Korath sat beside him, equally silent. "How did we lose to them?" Azrael asked quietly. "They have inferior technology, smaller numbers, shorter lifespans. How did mortals defeat gods?" Korath had been thinking about that question for days. "They were never afraid of us. From the first moment Captain Morrison met our forces, they treated us like just another alien species. They analyzed our weapons, studied our tactics, and adapted accordingly. But our psychic powers had no effect on them. They seemed naturally resistant to mental influence. Or perhaps," Korath paused, considering, "perhaps they're just too stubborn to be impressed by anyone." Azrael laughed bitterly, defeated by stubbornness. "And bureaucracy," Korath added. "They have forms for everything, including surrender procedures. For self-proclaimed deities, they approach the impossible with administrative efficiency." Back on T. 6 months after the surrender, Captain Jake Morrison found himself in the strangest assignment of his career. The USS Defiant was orbiting the former Zephyrian homeworld, and Morrison was sitting across a conference table from beings who used to claim they were gods. His job was to help establish normal diplomatic relations with a species that was still learning how to exist without worshipping subjects. The Krellans are requesting increased trade quotas for their metal exports, Morrison reported to Admiral Korath Vex, who now served as the Zephyrian liaison to human forces. They want to expand their mining operations and need technical assistance. Korath nodded, making notes on a human-designed tablet. The former Divine Admiral had adapted surprisingly well to his new role as a bureaucrat. What about the Vortaki Education Initiative? Going well. They've established 12 new universities and are requesting human teachers for their engineering programs. Apparently, they want to learn how to build ships that can fight gods. Korath winced slightly. They still call us that sometimes. It will take time for old habits to change. Morrison studied the alien who had once commanded fleets in the name of divine authority. Korath looked healthier than he had during the war, less burdened by the weight of maintaining an impossible illusion. Do you miss it? Being worshipped, I mean. You would think I would, Korath said thoughtfully. But the truth is, being a god was exhausting. We spent so much energy maintaining the illusion that we forgot what it was like to simply exist. Now, I can have conversations with other species without them prostrating themselves every few minutes. It's surprisingly pleasant. On the bridge of the USS Independence, Admiral Patricia Davis was reviewing the quarterly reports from across the former Zephyrian Empire. The transformation had been remarkable. Worlds that had stagnated under divine rule were now experiencing rapid technological and social development. Admiral, called her communications officer, Lieutenant Grace Murphy, we're getting a priority message from the Thraxian Republic. They've successfully tested their first faster-than-light drive. Davis smiled. The Thraxians had been one of the most oppressed species under Zephyrian rule, forbidden from developing advanced technology. Now they were building their own starships and exploring systems that had been off-limits for centuries. Send our congratulations and offer technical assistance if they need it. Dr. Helen Price approached with her latest research report. Admiral, I've completed the analysis of the Zephyrian crystal technology. The applications for medical science alone could revolutionize healthcare across human space. Any progress on understanding their psychic abilities? That's the interesting part. It turns out their psychic powers weren't that unusual. Many species have similar abilities to some degree. The Zephyrians just learned to amplify them through technology and psychological conditioning. What made them effective was the belief of their subjects, not any inherent divine nature. Davis found that fitting. The Zephyrian Empire had been built on faith rather than force, and once that faith was broken, the entire system collapsed overnight. In the former god temple on the Zephyrian homeworld, High Priestess Liralai was working with human archaeologists to document 3,000 years of imperial history. The crystal halls that had once blazed with divine light now hummed with the quiet efficiency of a research facility. This section details the early expansion period, she explained to Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead historian from Earth. When we first encountered primitive species, we genuinely believed our advanced abilities made us superior beings. The worship began almost accidentally. When did you realize you weren't actually gods? Liralai paused in her work. I think we always knew deep down. But after a few centuries of being worshipped, it became easier to believe our own propaganda. We told ourselves that our superior technology and longer lifespans gave us the right to rule. Eventually, we forgot the difference between having power and deserving it. Dr. Kim made notes on her tablet. What changed when you met humanity? You didn't care about our claims of divinity. You looked at our technology and saw engineering problems to solve. You looked at our empire and saw a protection racket that needed to be shut down. You treated us like equals who had gotten too big for their britches. And that bothered you? Liralai laughed, a sound that would have been impossible during the days of divine authority. It terrified us, but it also freed us. We had been trapped in our own mythology for so long that we had forgotten how to be anything else. Former God Emperor Azrael spent his days in what had once been his throne room, now converted into an office where he worked with human legal experts to establish war crimes tribunals. The trials were conducted with careful attention to justice, rather than vengeance, focusing on the systematic oppression of subject species rather than personal punishment. The Kandorian testimony is particularly damning, noted Judge Rebecca Stone, the chief prosecutor sent from Earth. Forced labor, resource extraction, and prohibition of technological development. These are clear violations of interspecies law. Azrael nodded sadly. We told ourselves we were protecting them from the dangers of advanced technology. In reality, we were keeping them dependent on our supposed divine intervention. Why are you cooperating with these proceedings? You could have refused to participate. Because Admiral Davis was right. We committed crimes against entire civilizations. The fact that we called it divine will doesn't change what we did. If we're going to move forward as a normal species in a larger galaxy, we need to acknowledge our mistakes. The trials would continue for months, but they were conducted with a spirit of justice rather than revenge. Many Zephyrians received suspended sentences in exchange for cooperation in dismantling the imperial system and providing technical assistance to their former subjects. Morrison's strangest assignment came when he was asked to escort delegation of former Zephyrian gods to a diplomatic conference with their former subjects. The meeting was held on a neutral space station with representatives from all 47 liberated species. This is surreal, Morrison muttered to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, as they watched Admiral Korith shake hands with a Kraylan diplomat who used to worship him as a divine being. It's working, though, Amy replied. Look at the trade agreements they're negotiating. The Zephyrians have 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge to share, and their former subjects have resources and perspectives they've never had access to before. The conference was a success. Species that had been forbidden from contact with each other for millennia were establishing diplomatic relations, trade partnerships, and scientific exchanges. The galaxy was becoming more connected and collaborative than it had ever been under divine rule. Admiral Davis attended the closing ceremony, watching as former gods and their former subjects signed mutual defense pacts and cultural exchange agreements. It was a remarkable transformation from an empire based on fear to a coalition based on cooperation. "Admiral," said Colonel Tim Brooks, "we've received word from Earth Command. They're requesting a detailed report on how to handle future encounters." With self-proclaimed deities, Davis smiled. "Tell them the procedure is simple. Treat divine claims like any other unsubstantiated assertion. Request documentation, ask for performance metrics, and don't be impressed by fancy light shows. Gods tend to be less godlike when you ask them to fill out forms." The final scene of the Great Transformation took place 1 year after the surrender. Captain Morrison was back aboard the USS Defiant, exploring new systems beyond the former Zephyrian Empire. His crew had encountered 3 new species in the past month, all of whom had responded to first contact with curiosity rather than worship. "It's different out here," Morrison told Admiral Davis during their weekly communication. "The species we're meeting now have never been conditioned to expect gods from space. They're much more interested in trade relations and cultural exchange than divine authority. Any problems? Just the usual first contact challenges. Language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and one species that wanted to know if we could help them with their tax system. Apparently, they have similar problems with revenue collection that we do." Davis laughed. Some things were universal. Even across species lines, the Zephyrian Empire was history, replaced by a loose confederation of independent worlds that traded freely and governed themselves. The former gods had become respected members of the galactic community, valued for their knowledge and experience rather than feared for their power. And at the center of it all, humanity continued to explore, to trade, and to treat the impossible, with the same calm professionalism they brought to everything else. When the next species claimed divine authority, they would find themselves facing opponents who measured miracles against standard operating procedures and asked for proper documentation. Of supernatural claims, the age of gods was over. The age of equal partnership among the stars had begun. Morrison filed his final report on the Zephyrian incident with a recommendation that became standard procedure for all future exploration missions. When encountering claims of divinity, maintain professional skepticism, document all phenomena, and remember that anyone can claim to be a god until they meet someone who isn't impressed. In the end, that was home.